August 15, 1945. The sun hangs low over the barbed wire horizon of the Tule Lake Segregation Center, Northern California. A hot wind moves across the sagebrush, carrying the faint smell of dust and distant pine. Inside Barrack 42, Block 7, a thin Nisei woman named Keiko Yamamoto stands motionless as a Red Cross volunteer places a small square of golden butter on a slice of fresh white bread. The paper wrapper crinkles. The butter is cold, almost white at its heart, and it gleams like captured sunlight. When Keiko lifts the bread to her lips, the scent rises, rich, clean, impossible. Tears begin before the taste reaches her tongue. One drop falls onto the butter and melts a tiny crater, and for the first time in 4 years, she remembers the dairy farms of Fresno County, the summer mornings when her father would skim cream so thick the spoon stood upright. Around her, other internees, old men in patched coats, mothers clutching children, watch in silence as the same yellow square has passed from hand to trembling hand. No one speaks, only the soft sound of weeping and the slow, deliberate chewing of bread that tastes, suddenly, like freedom. This moment, preserved in a handful of Red Cross photographs and in the private memoirs of those who lived it, marks the exact instant when the war ended, not with a bomb or surrender broadcast, but with the taste of real butter on the tongues of 120,000 Japanese Americans who had been stripped of everything except memory. For nearly 4 years, the United States government had insisted these citizens and their immigrant parents were a threat. Executive Order 9066, signed by President Roosevelt on February 19, 1942, less than 11 weeks after Pearl Harbor, authorized the forced removal of every person of Japanese ancestry from the West Coast. No charges, no trials. Only fear whipped into frenzy by politicians and newspapers that spoke of yellow hordes and fifth-column treachery. By November 1941, intelligence reports, later declassified, had already concluded there was no evidence of disloyalty among the Japanese American population. The FBI, the Office of Naval Intelligence, even General Mark Clark's staff stated clearly the Nikkei posed no military danger. Yet 112,000 men, women, and children, 2/3 of them American-born citizens, were given 1 week to dispose of homes, farms, businesses, pets, and dignity. They arrived at assembly centers carrying only what they could stuff into 2 suitcases. From there, under armed guard, they were loaded onto trains with shaded windows and shipped to 10 permanent relocation centers scattered across the emptiest quarters of the American interior. Life inside was rationed down to the gram. The War Relocation Authority allotted each internee 45 cents per day for food, less than the cost of feeding Army prisoners of war, less than the allowance for German and Italian POWs held in the same region. Breakfast was often a single scoop of stewed prunes and a slice of bread spread with oleomargarine dyed the color of despair. Lunch, boiled potatoes and a spoonful of canned Vienna sausage. Dinner, rice, more potatoes, and, if the supply truck was lucky, a few ounces of mutton so tough it was nicknamed roofing material. Butter, real dairy butter, vanished from the mess halls by mid-1942. In its place came a wartime substitute, a chalky white spread made from vegetable oil, salt, and artificial flavoring. Children born behind barbed wire grew up believing that the pale smear on their mother's scrape across dry toast was what butter was supposed to taste like. In Block 17 of Manzanar, a young girl named Mary Tsukamoto kept a secret diary. On March 3, 1944, she wrote, "Today the margarine came without the coloring packet. It looked like lard. Mother tried to make it yellow with grated carrot. It still tasted like nothing." At Heart Mountain, Wyoming, the camp newspaper ran a joke column titled Dream Menu. Every week it promised roast turkey with cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes swimming in butter, and apple pie a la mode. Readers laughed because the only truthful part was the word dream. German prisoners of war held in nearby camps, men who had tried to kill American soldiers, received real butter 3 times a week. The irony was not lost on the Nikkei mess crews who cooked for both populations. A cook at Tule Lake later recalled watching a truck unload crates stamped U.S. Army Grade AA butter destined for the POW stockade, while his own people lined up for powdered eggs. Then came August 1945. Hiroshima, Nagasaki. The emperor's voice, thin and trembling, crackling over shortwave radios hidden beneath floorboards. Guards who had once strutted with rifles now stood quietly as families gathered around loudspeakers. When the surrender was confirmed, the camp loudspeakers played the Star-Spangled Banner for the first time since 1941. Some internees wept. Others stood rigid, unsure whether the anthem still belonged to them. Within days, the Red Cross and the War Relocation Authority began the logistics of freedom. Trains were scheduled, suitcases, those same battered suitcases, were dragged out from under beds, and into this strange half-light of liberation came the butter. It arrived in 1-pound bricks packed in ice, stamped with the seal of the California dairy industry. Volunteers, mostly Quaker women and church groups who had protested the incarceration from the beginning, set up tables outside the mess halls. They sliced loaves still warm from army field ovens and spread each piece thickly, deliberately, as though the act itself were a sacrament. Old men who had not tasted real butter since the spring of 1942 closed their eyes and let the fat coat their tongues like forgiveness. A grandmother at rower camp in Arkansas took a single bite, then pressed the rest of the slice into her grandson's hand so he would know what his country had once given freely and then taken away. In the written testimonies collected by the War Relocation Authority in 1945 and 1946, the word butter appears more than any other foodstuff. Not rice, not fish, butter. It became the recurring symbol of everything lost and everything tentatively restored. A farmer from Salinas wrote, "When I tasted it, I remembered my cows by name: Daisy, Clover, Buttercup. I had sold them for $10 a head the week we were evacuated." A teenager confessed, "I cried because it tasted exactly like the Saturday mornings before the war when my father would fry eggs in butter and the whole house smelled like peace." The transformation was immediate and profound. Men who had answered no to the infamous loyalty questionnaire, refusing to swear unqualified allegiance to a nation that had imprisoned their families, now stood in line for their butter ration with tears cutting channels through the dust on their cheeks. Women who had sewn American flags in secret now waved tiny paper ones distributed by the Red Cross, not in triumph, but in wonder that they were being handed anything at all. The taste on their tongues contradicted everything the barbed wire had taught them about who they were allowed to be. In the mess hall at Minidoka, Idaho, an Nisei elder raised a slice of buttered bread toward the ceiling and spoke in Japanese. "This is the real America, not the wire, not the guards. This." No one translated aloud, yet every person in the room understood. By December 1945, the camps were emptying. The last internee left Tule Lake on March 20, 1946. Many returned to find their farms stolen, their businesses looted, their names erased from school yearbooks. But in attics and trunks across the West, small squares of wax paper were carefully folded and saved, grease-stained relics holding the faint ghost scent of dairy. Mothers pressed them into scrapbooks beside baptism certificates and high school diplomas. Years later, when children asked why Grandma kept a greasy piece of paper, the answer was always the same: so you will never forget what they took and what they finally gave back. The butter had done its quiet work. It did not erase 4 years of injustice. It did not restore lost farms or dead parents or stolen childhoods, but it pierced the lie that abundance and democracy could be rationed by race. In that single extravagant gesture, offering real butter to people who had been fed margarine and contempt, the nation admitted, without words, that its ideals were larger than its fears. And so, in the long after the camps were bulldozed and the watchtowers torn down, the memory of that taste remains. It lingers like a promise kept too late, a reminder that freedom is not only the absence of barbed wire, but the presence of ordinary miracles: warm bread, yellow butter, the indisputable evidence that a country can choose, even after its worst mistakes, to feed its own with open hands. For Keiko Yamamoto and tens of thousands like her, the war ended not with the flash over Nagasaki, but with the slow melt of dairy on the tongue, an American miracle, small and golden, proof that even in a nation capable of great wrong, the possibility of atonement can sometimes arrive wrapped in simple, abundant grace.